Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Lots of geopolitical developments to get to over the weekend with Stephen Bucci. We have 3 more hostages released in Gaza, including an American-Israeli hostage, first American to be released in this alleged détente, this deal, phase 1 of the deal period. We've got a half a dozen Americans held captive in Venezuela that Rick Grinnell got released. Somewhat of a pleasant surprise from his visit to Maduro. We got airstrikes against an ISIS outpost in Somalia. But before we get to that, just the culture change inside our national security and federal law enforcement agencies, and some of the hue and cry you're hearing from the left about it. We mentioned earlier in the program Hegseth at DOD announcing the end to identity months. We're not doing, wear your BLM sweaters on Friday in February business anymore. We're not doing that. President Trump tweeting out that federal workers are not to include their preferred pronouns in their email signatures and so forth anymore. We're not doing preferred pronouns anymore. And at FBI, DEI is ending. DEI is DEAD, as Trump said. And the go-to guy for MSNBC is retired FBI agent Frank Figliuzzi, who's really, he's just as hysterical as any of those mouth-breathing news readers at MSNBC, propaganda readers. They don't do news. What am I talking about? This is what he had to say with Ari Melber. Talk about a meeting of the minds, with the picture of some wall being painted that had all these leftist buzzwords on it, diversity, inclusion, so on and so forth. That's being painted over because that's part of the DEI propaganda that's, going the way of the dodo bird. Here's Figliuzzi's reaction.
Any semblance of diversity and inclusion is literally being wiped off the map. The New York Times put out a photo today of the walls of Quantico, the FBI Academy, where they're painting over the FBI's core values to include integrity, adherence to the Constitution, and diversity. A less diverse FBI is a less effective FBI. Try doing surveillance on the street in the inner city with 2 white guys. Try working undercover in a Middle Eastern terror organization with a white guy. It doesn't work that way. So we're becoming less and less safe very quickly.
Understood. I mentioned...
It's just asinine. It's just so asinine. This is the specious arguments they make, just like when they conflate illegal immigration with legal immigration. No one is opposing people of different racial and ethnic and religious backgrounds being an FBI, but the basis of their employment at the FBI is not their identity as much as their competency. This is just such a complicated concept. Diversity doesn't need a steward. It happens naturally when you have a meritocracy, because people from a lot of different walks of life have a lot of different talents and capacities. So the idea that, right, if you don't have diversity painted on a wall, diversity is our strength, which is an Orwellian phrase, by the way. That the irony is completely lost on the Figliuzzis of the world. If you don't have diversity painted on a wall, then you're going to have a lack of capacity when it comes to incurring into street gangs and otherwise advancing the cause of public safety. The whole thing is absurd. Figliuzzi is an absurd character, and MSNBC is an absurd network. But the arguments need to be made over and over again. By the way, Hegseth has explicitly said that diversity is our strength as the mantra at DOD is asinine, and it's over. We don't need to emphasize that. We need to emphasize combat readiness. We need to do things that are in the interests of the warriors. And that's exactly right. Warriors of all sizes and stripes. MEI, merit, excellence, integrity. DEI. There's your choice. There's your choice between the two sides. For more on all this, Stephen Bucci joins us for our weekly confab. He served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. Now visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be on the show, Dan. Thank you for having me back again.
The culture change, the culture shift is Figliuzzi's concerns notwithstanding. What do you sense is the rank and file response at, for example, DOD?
I think people in DOD, people in the law enforcement organizations that I work together with, in my other jobs in government, are all people who focus on competence. They don't care what you look like. If you can protect their back in a bad situation, if you can do your job to the level that is expected, they're perfectly fine with you. You don't have to look like me to be good. In fact, there's a lot of people who look absolutely nothing like me that are better than me at a whole bunch of things. We need to hire the people who are the most competent, regardless of how they look. I know the DEI people go crazy, but we need to go back to the colorblind idea that it doesn't matter what somebody looks like. Look, I had a sergeant when I was a young lieutenant, and he got asked by a black general, well, what's the racial component of this platoon? And this guy who was a Jew from Hawaii, a little bit of diversity there, he looked at him, he goes, I don't know, sir. And the general was aghast. What do you mean you don't know? He goes, they're all green. They do their job. I know their names. I know their wives. I don't really care what color they are, as long as they can do what I ask them to do. And the general, this was back in the 70s, so the general was just, he didn't know what to say. That's what we need to go back to.
Right. Well, exactly. And in these institutions with these politicians like Figliuzzi, I'm sure was at FBI, given his performance on MSNBC, it's just the same old rap. It's the same old rap you hear with Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, these poverty pimps on the outside that are shakedown artists. All it is, there was bad times in America where there was institutional racism, and that was wrong, and we're going to pretend that it's 1963 Selma forever. I mean, that's just what they want to do.
Yeah, and that's just absurd. Agreed, 63 was bad. We needed to change a lot of stuff. We have changed it. We've changed it tremendously. Not perfectly yet, but tremendously. But we don't need to institutionalize racism in the other direction, which is what DEI does. It causes more friction between people than solving any problem. And that's not positive, particularly when you're in organizations where your life depends on the camaraderie, the connection that's there. Again, I've been in units that were predominantly black. I've been in units that had more Hispanics than anything else. I've never been in a unit that was predominantly female, but I've been in units with females and worked for females. Nobody cares as long as they can do their job.
Speaking of nobody caring, Rick Grinnell, who happens to be gay, nobody cares. He was Trump's NSA, special envoy. He was sent over to talk to a bloodthirsty dictator named Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And Rick Grinnell got 6 of our people, 6 Americans, out of captivity there. And we also have compliance with Venezuela accepting Tren de Aragua goons, gangbangers, back to Venezuela. We're going to repatriate those people in this country illegally from Venezuela.
And they're going to pay for it.
Who pose a public safety threat. And that was a quick about face. Now, I'm a little intrigued by what details, what Venezuela gets in return. Maybe, I don't know, Chevron's special license over there. I don't know what it is, but I mean, I'm happy with what we got, but do you have any idea what Venezuela got?
I don't. But I do have pretty good faith in Rick Grinnell. He is a tough, smart man. He's not he's not John Kerry going to, negotiate with moms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rick is going to push a tough deal. So I'm comfortable trusting him that we didn't get screwed with that deal and that he got those people back for a cost that is reasonable and appropriate for getting American citizens back.
What are your thoughts on Trump sending violent illegals to Gitmo?
Until we get sorted out with all these countries that they're going to take their people back, which is, obviously, it took 2 steps with Colombia. It's taken Rick Grinnell to go talk to Venezuela. We don't want to keep them inside the United States proper. There's too many rules kick in with that. And I'm not talking about being mean to them. I'm talking about they get left in the U.S. judicial system, which they don't belong in. They're not American citizens. So taking them to Gitmo for short periods of time until we can arrange their repatriation to their home countries makes more sense than keeping them, say, in Texas. That's why we had the terrorists there, is because we wanted to keep those folks, away from all of the benefits of the American system that's there for American citizens. But our legal system is such that if they're on American soil, they have access to those systems. So this is, I think, a smart move. Plus, there's facilities there. We don't have to build something new, and that makes good fiscal sense.
I wanted to get back to what I mentioned at the outset, which is 3 more hostages released by Hamas. This phase 1 of this deal. Gideon Black writing in the Free Press, the Hamas leader who arranged for the killing of my cousin and attempted to have me killed got out of prison January 25th as part of the ceasefire agreement. He had served 22 years of what were supposed to be 6 life sentences, 1 for each person whose murder he orchestrated. Yoni Jesner, my cousin and closest friend, was 19 years old when a Hamas suicide bomber, who this Hamas terrorist dispatched, murdered him and 5 others on a bus in Tel Aviv in 2002. More than 2 decades later, emotional scarring from that bombing, which I survived by the slightest margin, is still etched into my soul, so are physical scars on my torso. Time, it turns out, does not heal all wounds. His point is to say, obviously, these are his words. I weep with happiness as the hostages return home, but how can this be the price of their liberation? This deal, it's a tough one because you have 3 hostages released and you celebrate that, but all of these Hamas killers who we are releasing in exchange, thinking even medium term, and this difficult assessment of the trade-offs here. What is your assessment of this deal? Remember, it's not our deal. It's an Israeli deal. And, yeah, but we brokered it.
It's true. But, the Israelis, this is what they do to get their citizens out. They give away, 100 convicted killers. They're not hostages. They're convicted people who had, fair trials and were convicted and let them go to get one of their citizens out. That's their modus operandi. I don't like it. I think they should have done some better vetting as to who they let go, not just wholesale. But this is their thing. We're the adjunct to this, not the ones driving the train. So no, I don't like the fact that some of those people have been released. They're horrific people. I just hope they were issued their pager free of charge from the Israeli people before they were released. The airstrikes that DOD Secretary Hegseth authorized against ISIS Somalia in the Golis Mountains over the weekend. What is happening in the African theater with respect to Islamist terrorism, and how much involvement, support is being provided by the Chinese Communist Party to these Islamist terrorists to create problems for America in North Africa in particular? I'm not sure how much the Chinese are brokering this, though I'm sure if they were asked, they would be more than happy to help. Most of this is coming from other Muslim countries, and not necessarily the government. Sometimes it's wealthy individuals in those countries. But the Islamist threat is still there. It has not gone away. It's been lessened for a while, and now it's starting to come back. It's one of those things that if you stop squashing the cockroaches, they start to breed and they multiply. So that's a problem, and it's something. Hopefully now with the new administration in, like we did over the weekend, we'll be paying attention to that. And when those cockroaches pop up, we'll squish them.
Do you have any, I just have to ask because of your military background, the DCA crash last week with the American Airlines flight and the Black Hawk helicopter. On the Black Hawk helicopter side of it, do you have any perspective on operations that go on at Reagan National, both military and civilian side by side, and how that Black Hawk helicopter could have been at the same elevation as that that American Airlines flight that was on final approach?
Well, it's a very busy piece of airspace. There's a ton of military stuff flying around there, mostly helicopters. The fixed wing are usually out at Andrews on the other side of the river. But the helicopters are all over the place between the units that take care of all the VIPs. They fly out of mostly Bolling Air Force Base, but the Army ones come out of Fort Belvoir down Davis Army Airfield, and it's busy. Now, why this guy was at the 350-foot mark when all the experts are now saying that they're supposed to fly at about 200, if that sentence is true, then there was a pilot error. Somebody screwed up and had that those guys were at the wrong altitude. I don't know what to. We need to let the NTSB finish their job before we really pass any judgment. And I got to tell you, the NTSB does not work any faster than the perfection that they go for, and that's going to be very frustrating for everybody. But we need to let them do their job because it's worked for a lot of years at getting to the real truth of why one of these tragic incidents occur. And this one's pretty complex, so it's gonna take them a bit.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thank you as always.
It's always my pleasure, guys. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The Madras table and chairs at Penny Mustard remind me of the classic cartoon set in the future.
With George and Jane.
Daughter Judy.
And his boy, Elroy. Huh?
The Madras table looks like something you'd see in one of those movies set in the distant future. Only it's here now.
Just like the future.
How is that?
The future is now.
It is?
Well, it was, but that's in the past. Now the future is now. No, wait. It's now.